We embrace virtual connections, and because of that, I am here now doing what I am doing now. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a hot afternoon here, but I know you'll understand the situations. I mean, yeah. Okay, I am your reporter for today, and our course is the 2P MSE 05, or the Teaching of Social Studies and Values Education in Elementary Grades. And by the way, I am Tatoy Maribaldi, or Maribaldi Tato. You can call me Belle, from the Bachelor of Mathematics and Science Elementary Education, second year student. And to our beloved professor, ma'am, good afternoon, ma'am. May apat. Now, here is my topic for this afternoon. The planning for effective teaching. Planning for effective teaching. Effective teaching might result in student learning. Teaching and learning are not necessarily related. And consistently good learning rarely occurs without effective teaching. When we say effective teaching, result to student learning, and consistently good learning rarely occurs without effective teaching. The two are related, right? Now, you can test your if your teaching is effective if and only if your student were able to learn or were able to apply the teachings you have taught them, right? Okay, next is the best, most effective teachers are those who establish conditions most conducive to learning. Okay, there are two basic types of conditions, the basic and the desirable. Now let's learn these two types of conditions. For the basic condition for learning, it has branches. Okay, the first one is the meaningful application. The second one is the manageable task. The third one is examples of expected performance, the opportunities to learn. Okay, that concludes all. Now, let's go to the basic condition, the first branch, the meaningful application. When we say meaningful application, learning tasks should be related to situations which students are now familiar or to which they can reasonably expect to encounter in the future. Information and skills should be shown as useful to student. Meaningful application. Like, you are learning these things because you know this is useful. Like, we are learning useful things. For example, kita, um, I am aspiring to be an educator someday. That's why I am learning how to teach students. Right? Wala akong nag-study og kuan, wala akong nag-study pagluto. Why? Because I am gonna be an educator. So, what I am learning now is the learnings applicable for the future, for the profession I am aspiring to become. Now, the basic condition, second branch, is the manageable task. When we say manageable task, is learning tasks should be organized so that students have the prerequisite skills for what they are asked to do. So when you are making a task for your students, dapat dapat nakaplaster siya para ang mga estudyante dili sila maglibog kung unsa ilang buhaton or sila magsugod, or kung mutugma pa ba ang ilang gibuhat sa dapat nila nga buhaton, if I am right. Then, tasks should be arranged systematically and set at a difficulty level appropriate for the students. Of course, you can't expect an elementary student to perform a let's say, you can't expect a kindergarten student to dissect a frog, right? There must be levels of difficulty on what task you give them, if they are still in elementary level, you can give them the experiments that they will be able to do. And if they are already in high school, so if they can do the experiments more specific, more complex experiments, then they can handle that task you will give them. And if college students like us, if you give the college students tasks that are applicable for elementary students, it will be very very boring for them, and most of them will not cooperate, most of them will not attend to your classes with that. The next one is the basic condition examples of expected performances. You should have examples. Students should have access to examples which illustrate how tasks are to be performed. Of course, they must know what they must do. They must be guided. And to be guided, they must have an examples. Okay, so the next one is examples of expected performances. Students should have access to examples which illustrate how tasks are to be performed. There should be examples to optimum error-free performance if possible, and examples of what is acceptable achievements in various situations. Next is the basic opportunities to learn. Students should be able to practice learning what they are expected to learn. These practice may take place in situations which are either identical, equivalent, or analogous to those situations in which students will need to apply or demonstrate what they have learned. The next one is the knowledge of results. Students should have information on how well they are progressing. One example of that is having evaluations or activities. By that, the student will know if they have learned something with your teachings, like if they have high score or if they've got the perfect scores for your evaluations, that it will let them know that they are doing better, that they are learning. They need to be aware of the errors they make, how to go about correcting those errors, and the extent to which they are succeeding. Okay, we're done with the basic conditions. Now let's move on to the desirable conditions for learning. Okay, its branches are the opportunities for choice, opportunities for success, active involvement, supportive environment, and the supportive environment. Now, for the opportunities for choice, when we say opportunities for choice, it is enabling students to make choices about what and how they learn, encourages their participation in the learning task. If students lack opportunities to make decisions about their own learning, they will seldom take responsibility for it. How can we take that into examples? Well, let's say, it's like a teacher-centered or a learner-centered environment. When we say teacher-centered, it is the only the teacher that is talking in front. And effective learning means that your students must have the rights. I mean, your students must be able to give their insights. They must be able to give examples, give their own understanding, share their own understanding. By doing that, they will cooperate to the learning task. Like instead of feeding them into what they are, into what they have to do, they can decide and they will have the initiative to do the things that will make them more proper, successful. Now, the next is desirable condition, opportunities for success. Students should have more than one opportunity to complete a learning task successfully. They should be able to make errors without always facing a penalty for failures. A single choice, single opportunity, single mistake is not really that effective for the learner to be even more fruitful. Desirable condition, active involvement. Now, learning task should engage students and hold their attention. Students needs to be entertained. Needs to be entertained. What do you mean by that? If you want your discussion to be more lively, you have to get your students' attention, and by getting their attentions, you must have activities. What kind of activities? Activities that would fit their level of development. If they are kindergartens loves doing action songs. They like doing um, games and activities that would let them do some kinetic works. And for like in senior high schools, some senior high schools, they are more on social media now, so you can adopt a little bit of social media inspirations to them, like letting them have a role playing about the movie they like. It will get their attention, it will entertain them, at the same time they will learn. Next is desirable conditions, supportive environment. Student may be threatened or discouraged by what they are expected to learn. Some student, like myself before, I'm sometimes afraid if I happen to encounter difficult difficult task or difficult activity. It makes me wonder if I'll be able to do it well, effectively, or properly. So our teachers would always encourage us to just do our best, and mistakes are there, but we can learn from our mistakes, and they will always they will accept what we pass to them, what we can offer to them, as long as it is from our hard work. The instructional context should be such that they can get assistance in working through the problem they encounter. Like during our ICT class, we each one of us were given the opportunity to hold a personal computer. Like we are going to manipulate this computer one by one, and it is very convenient for us, and it gets our attention, and at the same time we learn while we are enjoying our tasks. Okay, teaching for learning is enhanced when students understand what is expected of them, are fully engaged in their work, get recognition of their work, learn quickly about their errors, and learn from their errors. They will learn from their mistakes. Receive guidance for improvement work under a suitable classroom atmosphere, class discipline, openness to learning. That's how you see an effective learning, effective teaching. Now we have done discussing about the two conditions in effective learning, the basic and the desirable conditions. Let us now move to the process of instructional planning. The first process is what we call as establish clear outcomes. Establish clear outcomes. Okay? What do we mean by that? Establish a clear understanding of the goals of the lessons or unit, and specific learner outcomes relate to the desirable outcomes and essential students' understanding and performance for every learner. What does the learning look like? What will students be able to do or demonstrate? The desired big ideas learners should come to understand and their alignment to the established standards within the program of study. The potential misunderstanding and misconceptions in the areas where learners may meet barriers to learning? How will goals be clearly communicated to the learners in ways that are understandable to all learners? In this, establish clear outcomes. You are going to foresee the whole discussions, like what do you want to achieve? You want your students to learn about, if your topic is the life cycle, of course one of your objectives, like the outcomes, your objectives is for them to be able to classify the herbivores, carnivores, the primary consumers, the secondary consumers, and what are those organisms like, what animals belongs to the carnivores group, the herbivores group. By that, they will be able to classify what they must be able to classify. Now, the second one is anticipate learner needs. You anticipate, you expect the learner's needs. Okay, prior to planning the instructional experience, teachers should have a clear understanding of the learner needs within their environment. If you want your discussion to be even more effective, you must have these um, this balanced relationship with your student. Like, you know what your students needs, and you understand their needs, and you are able to cope up or to give them a hand for the things they needed, or the things that are needed to be improved for them to be able to cooperate to your discussions, oral discussions. So learner strength and weaknesses specific to lesson unit goals. Learners' backgrounds, knowledge, or scaffolding you learning. Learners' preference for representation, expression, and engagement. Learner language preferences, cultural relevance and understanding. Curriculum barriers such as physical, social, cultural, or ability level that couldn't limit the accessibility to instruction and instructional materials. Some teachers technique, or they get their students, like they befriend their students, they get close to their students, so that their students will be open to them. Their students will be even more willing to share to them their opinions, their, like, what they're experiencing in inside the classroom. Now, the next one is measurable outcomes and assessment plan. Measurable outcomes and assessment plan, like a lesson planning. Now, prior to planning the instructional experience, establish how learning is going to be measured. Consideration should include, first is previously established lesson goals and learner needs. Second is embedding checkpoints to ensure all learners are successfully meeting their desired outcomes. The next is providing learners multiple ways and options to authentically engage in the process. The third one is take actions and demonstrate understanding. The fourth one is supporting higher order skills, and encouraging a deeper connections with the content. So the fourth one is instructional experience. What is instructional experience? Establish the instructional sequence of events at minimum. Plans should include intentional and proactive ways to address the established goals, learners' needs, and the assessment plans. Establish a plan for how instructional materials and strategies will be used to overcome barriers and support learners' understandings. A plan to ensure higher expectations for all learners, and that the needs of the learners in the margins struggling in advance, anticipating that a broader range of learners will benefit. Integrate an assessment plan to provide necessary data. Okay, the next one is the fifth one, the last one is the reflection and new understanding. Reflection and new understanding is establish checkpoints for teacher reflection and new understandings. Consideration should include the first one is whether the learners obtained the big ideas and obtained the desired outcomes. What data supports your inference? What instructional strategies work well? How can instructional strategies be improved? What tools worked well? How could the use of tools be improved? What strategies and tools provided for multiple means of representations, actions, expressions, and engagement? What additional tools would have been beneficial to have access to, and why? Overall, how might you improve these lessons? So those were the possible questions and or the reflections you must have and new understandings. Okay, that. Now we'll move on to important points to remember in planning and organizing instructions. First one is we must remember that our daily teaching, learning is supposed to contribute to the realization of the vision, mission statement of the DepEd to help develop Filipinos who passionately love their country and whose values and competencies enables them to realize their full potential and contribute meaningfully to the building the nations. That means that the vision and the mission of the DepEd, what is it? You must in your teaching you must be able to apply some of those vision and missions, like your students must have this assertive and cognitive values. And number two is if you belong to a private institutions, bear in mind that the vision mission statement of your school in addition to the DepEd's vision and mission statement. So the DepEd's vision and mission statement should be included still. Now for the third one, consider two the Philippine Qualifications Framework issued through EO number 83 by the Office of the President on October 1, 2012. Now these grade 10 and grade 12 qualifications laid down in the PQW, the Philippine Qualifications Framework, flow into the standards that are contained in the curriculum guide for K-12.5. Our instructional, okay, number 5 is, so for number 5, that's a number 5. Our instructional planning is supposed to begin with a study of the K-12 curriculum guide for the subjects that we teach. So we must be guided with our curriculum guides. Like our most of our professors have sent us already the curriculum guides for us to be guided of what topics we must teach to these levels of students. Now the fourth is this grade, so I have done reading that, and number 5 also. Now the sixth is which instructional plan you are going to prepare depends on what your school requires. Of course, you must like what we say, you have to be versatile. With that, if you happen to be teaching in rural areas or urban areas, you must be able to cope up with them. Like in highland areas, they don't have the electricity there, so you must have your instructional plan ready, like the visual aids, the Bitimax, that is the normal instructional plan there. And if you happen to teach in the city, then you must be technology savvy. I mean, you should know the rules, the regulations, and the techniques, and how you will use these technologies for your students to be able to learn also. Because you are a teacher, we are teachers. I am an aspiring teacher, future teacher. We are tasked to practice using these technologies for the future generations, future learners, students. Apply all the principles of learning, teaching and learning that you have learned in Principle of Teaching 1 and the research-based instructional strategies discussed in chapter 4. Now always begin with the end in mind. What comes up to our mind when we hear that phrase? Always begin with the end in mind. When we say end in mind, so you have already visualized the outcomes of your discussion. Like, I want my student to learn about this, about that. So my topics should relate to this, to that. I want them um, to master the art of singing, the art of music. So I should give them a lot of exercises, activities related to singing, to music. Or I want them to be knowledgeable. I want them to learn about the cells, the prokaryotic and the eukaryotic cells. So I have a model. I will I should be able to provide models and activities that would engage them and that would let them learn, at the same time enjoy the whole session of our discussion. Now 8 under 7 is do assessment to ensure learning. So our assessment, that's we all know that assessment serves as the testing points. I mean, it's it's how you will learn. It's how you will see if your students, if your discussion is effective, if your students have learned something, have learned a lot about your lessons. Now number 10 is give your students opportunity to access themselves, to assess themselves, or give them opportunities to know if they were doing wrong, if they were doing right, and by that learn to accept their mistakes and let them realize their mistakes and learn from it. You teach two types of knowledge: declarative and procedural procedural knowledge. Declarative, you have gave them the informations, the ideas. Now the procedure, it will it will develop, even if it will develop the knowledge even more with that procedural knowledge. Don't forget that that part of instructional planning is utilization of assessment results. You utilize your assessment result, so you know you will be able to utilize your time also during the discussion, and you will also be able to get your students, not let your students to divert their attentions to other things. Okay, thank you. Thank you. That concludes my report for this afternoon.